You know, we often think that surviving a cardiac arrest is the end of the story. It's that miraculous second chance, the happy ending. But what if that's not the end? What if survival is just the beginning of a whole new chapter, and a really complicated one at that? For tens of thousands of people, the hardest part of their journey actually starts the moment they leave the hospital. This quote from a survivor, wow, it just gets right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that feeling, that immense pressure to just be grateful you're alive while you're privately grappling with a whole set of new and often invisible challenges. This isn't about being ungrateful, not at all. It's about recognizing that the reality is so much more complex.
And the reality for people who go home? Well, the numbers are pretty staggering. They aren't just back to normal. Get this, a massive 70% are hit with debilitating fatigue. I mean, just wiped out. Half of them struggle with cognitive issues, that brain fog that messes with your memory and your thinking, and 40% face ongoing physical difficulties. These aren't just stats on a chart. This is a fundamental change to a person's life.
And that's exactly why we have to start looking beyond just the idea of survival. We've got to understand the aftermath, the long-term impairments that really define what life is like after a cardiac arrest. Now, it's so important to be clear about who we're talking about here, because it's not just one person. First, of course, you have the survivor, the person who is resuscitated and is now back home. But just as important is the key supporter. That term was chosen very, very deliberately to recognize the huge impact on family, partners, and friends. They often witness the event and then become caregivers, dealing with their own trauma and stress. So when you see so many people facing these exact same problems, it points to something bigger, right? It points to a serious gap in our healthcare systems. The real question is, why are so many survivors and their families being left to figure all of this out on their own?
And listen, this isn't just happening in one place. It's a global challenge. Published data shows the exact same pattern everywhere, from the UK to the US. It's basically a lottery of care. There are no consistent standards, no dedicated follow-up. So people just fall through the cracks, no matter how good the healthcare system is supposed to be.
But what if there was a roadmap to fix this? A better way forward? Well, that's exactly what this next section is all about. We're going to look at the new quality standards from Resuscitation Council UK, which were designed specifically to fill this massive gap.
So what are these standards? At their core, they're a whole new framework for recovery. And this isn't some pie-in-the-sky idea that's impossible to implement. It's a realistic, achievable way to standardize care for both the survivors and, just as importantly, their key supporters. And the goals here are crystal clear. It's all about making sure everyone gets a minimum standard of assessment. From there, you get better services, which leads to better outcomes for physical, cognitive, and mental health. But the ultimate goal, a better quality of life for everyone who's been affected.
Okay, so that's the what and the why. Now let's get into the how. This section breaks down the actual, practical pathway to recovery that these new standards have laid out. It's the roadmap.
The whole thing is built around a really clear three-step journey. Step 1 is a full assessment before a patient even goes home. Step 2, they get a custom-built discharge plan and a scheduled follow-up at 3 months. And finally, Step 3, there's a system for long-term support, so help is always there if new problems pop up later on.
So let's talk about Step 1. This is so crucial. It's a proactive assessment that happens before discharge, and it's multidisciplinary, which means you have a whole team, nurses, therapists, psychologists, all working together to get a complete picture of what that survivor is going to need when they get home.
So what are they actually looking for? Well, the assessment zeroes in on 4 critical areas. They screen for cognitive issues like memory loss. They check for physical problems with mobility or balance. They look at emotional well-being, screening for things like anxiety and PTSD, and they pay special attention to fatigue because that is the #1 thing people report.
And to make sure these assessments are consistent and really thorough, they recommend using specific validated tools. For thinking skills, you have the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, or MoCA. For emotional health, there's the HAD scale. And check this out, for the key supporter, they use tools like the Zaret Burden Interview to actually measure their level of distress. That explicit focus on the supporter's health, that's a huge step forward.
So what's the end result of all this? You get an individually tailored discharge plan. This isn't some one-size-fits-all leaflet they hand you on your way out the door. It's a personalized roadmap with direct referrals to the exact specialist a survivor needs, whether that's an occupational therapist, a neuropsychologist, or a cardiac rehab program.
Next up is Step 2, the 3-month follow-up. And this part is absolutely vital.
Instead of just sending people home and hoping for the best, this new standard makes sure that all survivors and their supporters get an appointment with a dedicated team within 3 months. It's a crucial safety net.
And this follow-up is incredibly holistic. It goes way beyond just the clinical stuff. It covers real-life concerns like getting back to work and driving. It talks about psychosocial well-being, relationships, hobbies. And once again, you can see it right there, dedicated support for the key supporters. This is about treating the whole person, not just the heart condition. And all of this brings us to our final section, which really ties everything together. Because the ultimate goal here isn't just clinical, it's about supporting the whole person and their family through this entire journey. At the end of the day, just fixing the clinical problem isn't really enough, is it? The real measure of success is helping survivors and their families successfully get back into their communities and their daily lives. It's about restoring their function, their confidence, and their sense of purpose.
And maybe the single most transformative idea in all of this is the goal of ending the postcode lottery. By creating one minimum level of care, these standards make sure that no matter where you live, you and your family are guaranteed access to a high-quality, supportive pathway to recovery.
Which brings us right back to that question from the very first quote we saw. What does true recovery really mean? Well, these standards suggest it means a lot more than just a restarted heart. It's the full restoration of a person's physical, cognitive, and emotional life. And it's a journey that requires a structured, compassionate system of support, long after the initial crisis is over.